Okay, we're going to reconvene City Council meeting here February 9th with the Pledge of Allegiance. John, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Well, welcome, everybody. Let's see, first thing on the agenda is citizen comments. And Mr. Maurer, I see you signed up.
Members of council and city management. You remember Marcia Grigsby, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the position she held in city management before she became city manager? Well, it was manager of, I don't know the exact title, but it was manager of finances, something like that. I precede everybody up here in time, probably even the whole city of Dublin, but I can go right back to the first manager of finances of Dublin, and I'm going to tell you about him tonight. The year is 1969. I'm living in Columbus. Never heard of a place called Dublin. And I had my two sons. My son Randy was 4, and Jeffrey was 2. And I decided I would take, starting that summer, one of them, one after the other, up to my mother's place, which was 50 miles north of Milwaukee. And since Randy was the older one, I took him first. Well, I got up there through the interstates, and I was able to make it in a day. But on the way back, I decided, I had Randy with me, I decided once I rounded Chicago, I would take the lesser roads. And did so, scrambled all across Indiana. And then when I got to Ohio, I also took roads that I didn't know anything about. And I got on one of them, which was particularly forlorn. And while I was on it, this was in Ohio now, about a mile ahead of me, I see a traffic light. And the lights are changing like this: green, yellow, red. Green, yellow, red. And I saw that I'm going to have probably some difficulty when I get to that traffic light. And sure enough, when I got to it just at the edge when it was green, and I entered it and it was already yellow, and long before I left it was red. So I drove on, and all of a sudden, sure enough, I looked in the rearview mirror. There was a cop on a motorcycle, and the lights were whirling. And he parked about 20 or 30 feet behind me, and then approached the car. And he adopted the gait of an old Western sheriff, like this. And he came up and stood by the passenger side of the car with a big smile on his face. And he stood there smiling, didn't say a word. It was my move. So I'm looking at him, smiling policeman, and I said, when I got to this traffic light, I saw the lights changing green, and I thought, well, I was there and it was green. And then I realized it's going to change fast, and I had to make a split-second decision. And then he spoke. He smiled, and he spoke through his smile, and he said, "And you made the wrong decision, didn't you?" So it developed when we did the paperwork that he was from a place called Dublin. And he was the finance director of Dublin. He was collecting these fines at every traffic light. He must have made a fortune. And I learned later that he was known as Rosie the Cop, who was the first finance minister of Dublin. So now you know. Thank you.
Thank you for the history lesson, Mr. Maurer. I've heard a lot of them, but I've never heard that one. This brings us to the consent agenda. Is there any council member have any item they'd like to remove? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the actions for the 5 items listed on the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Ann?
Ms. Ailey. Mr. Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mayor Keenan.
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
That brings us to ordinance 415. I'm not really sure protocol here. Dana, Jennifer, we're going to postpone this tonight? Do we read it into the record?
Right. The Planning Commission considered this the rezoning and conditional use last Thursday. They passed the conditional use or recommended approval, but tabled the conditional use. So if it's council's desire to wait until that process is finished before acting upon this, we would ask for postponement till the March 23rd council meeting.
Okay, if there's no objection on council, then we'll postpone this matter. We have a number of people that have signed up to speak, and if they'd like to address council at this time, they can come forward. We have Melanie Cornelius. Welcome. You can give your name and address, and there's a 5-minute time frame, consistent with council's rules.
Good evening, council members. My name is Melanie Cornelius. I'm from Linworth, okay? And I've come over to speak to the proposed land swap. Linworth, as many of you know, is situated between Worthington and Dublin, thus the name. I live in that portion that was annexed for another land swap, that involving the brewery going to Worthington and Indian Hills, my neighborhood, going to Columbus and Worthington. So I've come over tonight to speak to you because of my concern about the future of Dublin's continued development and the proposed land swap, and just bring a few things to your attention for your consideration. I'd like to call your attention in particular to the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Transportation Plan adopted in 2012. It's available online, and I can certainly send a link to your clerk. I think it's particularly significant because of the projections contained within that report about the future development, the future population expansion in this particular area. When you look, you will find that in as much as Dublin obviously is aware of the population pressure from the continual growth in this area, there's an area that has even more growth, according to the images in the report, and that is the area along Smoky Row up to Delaware, the city of Delaware. Smoky Row becomes Liberty Street, and that is kind of the back way into Delaware. Presently, there are 2 park and rides located on Smoky Row, and they relieve pressure, obviously, on Sawmill. All of us in this area are familiar with the problems on Sawmill. I don't need to educate anyone with that. I myself have sat for half an hour to 45 minutes on that road. So I'm particularly concerned about the proposed location of the park and ride upright at Sawmill. This is already an area which, at rush hour, the very time when the new proposed park and ride would be operating, is nearly at a standstill. I can hardly think that that would be in the interest of the city for either diverting traffic from Sawmill, certainly bus traffic, not. And it's certainly something I would ask that the council consider carefully for the sake of its residents, obviously, businesses, and visitors. Another consideration, and I'll make this very brief, is whether or not the city council feels that neighborhood transit, accessible transit to Dublin residents is a priority, because the clear shift to a huge park and ride of 170 spaces indicates that driving is now the priority, driving to a park and ride. And I can tell you, on behalf of the many, many riders that we have on Smoky Row Route 30, which is scheduled to be canceled if the park and ride goes in, that most of us, the vast majority of us, would not be in a position where it is feasible to drive to the new proposed park and ride. So the very purpose of moving the route to serve people from that mid area between Worthington and Dublin might not be quite the good idea that it appears to be. So I ask for your consideration as you take a look at the ordinance, and I thank you.
Thank you. Randy Roth.
Are there others?
Yeah, let's go on with Eleanor Black. Eleanor Black, if you come forward, please. If you'd state your name and address. Welcome.
Good evening, how are you?
Mhm.
Good. My name's Eleanor Black, my address is 5067 Cambrian Drive, Columbus, 43220. I'm been told I'm the bus mom of Route 33. I've kind of had this loose designation for a number of years. I have a passion for riding this bus. I no longer I live near 18 and 61 routes, but I still drive to 30 because I have a passion for these people. They've grown to be my family. I've rode the bus for 13 years. There are several individuals that I know personally because I take someone to a grocery store who cannot, well, basically almost lose her job if she does not have this route. There's another individual who has a brain injury. He also rides his bike in the evening home from High Street and Wilson Bridge every night. She takes a bus in the morning because he gets home too late in the evening in the evening. He cannot take a bus. So he would have very difficult time getting back home. And there's single parents on that bus who are walking to the bus and don't have cars. We have Columbus State students as well as OSU students that go downtown, and the OSU students transfer to bus 2 to get to the school. We also have parents that only have one car, and it would be a financial burden for them. So I have a passion, and my heart goes out to these people. If you have not been in a situation of living from hand to mouth and having to lose this public service that should be entitled to everybody's, I just think this is extremely wrong. And I would just, so that, I'm speaking because if we lose that park and ride, they want to eliminate our route. So I'm just asking you just to please consider our situation. And I'm also wanting to fight for other routes that are losing their privileges of express routes in the city. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
One thing I just wanted to clarify. The city of Dublin has limited, if anything, to do with the routing system of CODA. Is that not correct? I thought CODA makes the decisions on how their routes are going to go.
That's correct.
Okay. So the concerns certainly are very legitimate that the two speakers so far have raised, but it's CODA that you need to express your concern to directly, because they're the ones that actually establish the route.
We have, most definitely.
Understand.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill Wright, come forward. State your name and address, please.
My name is Bill Wright. I'm a resident of Worthington, 1110 Strathaven Drive, 43085.
Thank you.
I've lived on Route 30 for 30 years in various variations, and I'm here to I realize it's not your responsibility. Your responsibility certainly is to do what's best for the city of Dublin and its residents. But this decision that you're making, understandably so, could be a good business decision, but at this time, it's not for the purpose of improving ridership in Dublin, improving access. It's not for the purpose, certainly, of improving access to everyone else who will have their line eliminated. And I might mention that some of the long-term riders have been as much as 3 decades in various variations on that Route 30. So what I am urging you to consider is perhaps whatever you decide, perhaps you might decide that it would be a recommendation to CODA to keep Route 30, okay? And that would save you from whatever traffic might be added to your area, okay? Now, this is information that I would like everyone to know because there's no financial need to eliminate a critical work route like Smoky Row 30, because thanks to all of the people who have ridden the route for years and the tens and thousands of other people that ride CODA buses, these people, they're long-term committed and they're the highest paying CODA customers, $85 a month, okay? At the same time, CODA is giving away a service downtown. Their willingness to pay several rate increases and higher sales taxes, and Dublin might want to keep that in mind too, because you folks are paying those sales taxes, that levy. These loyal, committed riders, they've stuck with CODA through the 1990s when CODA ridership dropped by 50% from the 1980s. They stayed with CODA in 2004 when it had another 1.8 million deficit, and that was its third in 4 years. Its former CODA president called it their darkest hours, referring to the years 2000 through 2004. Now, these loyal Route 30 riders, they've sucked it up. They've paid every increase. They didn't complain. They've supported every levy that came to them. And for what? So CODA planners could throw them under the bus and claim that this little location up here is more efficient. Well, that's fine, okay? It makes sense to have park and rides. It makes sense as the population goes further and further out, you want to do that. But don't cut off the service to the older areas, and that's exactly what this is doing, okay? Now, at the same time, the part that people might not be aware of is thanks to all the levies that have been passed, the higher fees that have been paid, CODA has currently, they were running that deficit back in 2004, currently they have a surplus of $105 million. So I hope whatever deal you make on this land, you're getting your money's worth with CODA. They do like to say that this has to do with being more efficient and more effective. Rider 30s and the taxpayers and their consultants kind of have a better solution. Their solution doesn't breach taxpayer trust, because I feel this is a breach of taxpayer trust. Taxpayers passed that levy in exchange for keeping these routes, not cutting these routes. We want CODA to add service to other areas, but not at the expense of the existing areas. If there is a need to be a cut, then my recommendation and solution is to eliminate the $450,000 in CODA administrator bonuses and $400,000 in raises that have been recently passed out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. You know, to be clear, there's a road going right through the middle of the existing park and ride here in Dublin. There will be another park and ride somewhere. So, you know, I hear you, and I don't want to debate it, but I just wanted to make it clear that that's what's going on here.
But the Route 30, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's going to be eliminated, but it is really the one over by Smoky Row and all. So
Yeah.
it has, you know, less to do with Dale Drive or,
Yeah.
For clarification, CODA has made it very clear, the whole route, all the park and rides along the way will be eliminated with this swap.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cram?
Amy Cram, 7511 Riverside Drive. First, I'll say thank you for tabling it tonight. That was the first half of what I wanted to talk about, so I'm not going to talk about that. I think it is very important what the Smoky Row Riders are saying. I've actually been to both the CODA meetings that they've held and at the second one at the library. The Smoky Row Riders were extremely upset, and I think it bolsters the argument of the people using this bus route are not from the city of Dublin. This is not an amenity for the city of Dublin. This is for CODA. which has a much larger area. This is Delaware, Powell, huge area. If you look at the presentations that CODA provides, and you'll see when you finally get the rezoning, there's a graphic. It shows 24 people within the city of Dublin limits use that Dale Drive park and ride. 24 people. And if you look at it, only 3 of them are on the east side of Dublin. This just seems like the completely wrong place to put a park and ride. And it's staggering to think we're going to pay $1.2 million to construct this facility for 24 Dublin residents. This is great for CODA. This is exactly what they want. This is exactly where they want to be. And the problem is, it's not what the city should be doing with this piece of land, and it's not what the residents want with this piece of land. There's more people upset about this park and ride, more Dublin residents that don't want this, that live on Bright Road, that live on East Dublin, than would actually ride this bus these buses that are going to come out of there. So when we're negotiating with CODA, CODA shouldn't win on all aspects. They shouldn't get everything they want. We need to give something back to the residents of Dublin, and this negotiation for the land swap needs to favor the citizens of Dublin and not CODA. And you need to stand up for the citizens and do what they want, not what CODA wants.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Herring?
Good evening. My name's Scott Herring. I live at 3280 Lily Mar Court. And I'm here because I've been interested in the process. And yes, this all started because CODA owns a lot that's in the city of Dublin. A new road needs to go in. The city needs to acquire that right away. I think a lot of this meeting could have been avoided if the city could simply purchase the right of way that's required and say, CODA, sorry for your luck, here's some cash, go build what you want and where you want. But it seems we're in the middle of this, and that this ordinance was written to say, CODA, we'd like to take your entire lot, and we have some land elsewhere, and how about this? And so now all these other things are going on. So that would be my preference, and maybe that's what will come out of tonight's tabling, and when this comes back, is can we just keep it to building the road and let CODA do their thing? Because yes, now we're all embroiled in this together. So I am pleased with the decision to table this tonight. Seeing that it was marked as declared an emergency, I wasn't sure what the protocol was on that. I was surprised that after I got home from the planning and zoning meeting on Thursday night, I looked in the newspaper, and there on the front page is a story about this CODA, and the CODA representative was quoted as saying, right now this is just a proposal, and they're taking public comment. So I thought, holy smokes, here tonight we're talking about trading land, and the CODA representative says that this is still in flux. So I'm not quite sure where any of this stands. The other thing that's always been of interest is the economic aspect of things. As a result of Thursday night's meeting, Planning and Zoning has made the recommendation to convert this land from the R1 designation to suburban office. And suburban office, that sounds like some tax revenue. And in all the years I've lived in Dublin, there's been a lot of discussion about how do we attract businesses, payroll, revenue, taxes. That'd be great. Park and ride doesn't sound like much of a moneymaker. And really, as I read this ordinance, it sounds like a lot of this was, let's have the city of Dublin help CODA to relocate their facility. But as I've now learned, if CODA does close this Route 30 line, if we have an influx of folks who live in Columbus that now have to traverse west and across Sawmill into Dublin to catch a bus to go back to the city of Columbus, we're losing all the way around. So there's no residence tax revenue, there's no income tax revenue, and now we got even more people coming across Sawmill that sounds like they don't really want to do that. So we'll see what the future holds, but I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. And Mr. Roth.
Hi, I'm Randy Roth, 6987 Grandy Cliffs Drive, and I'm president of the East Dublin Civic Association. I'm going to speak very briefly, just here to thank you for your openness on this, and thanks to the P&Z. We got a really genuine hearing from them. They really listened to us very well, and we really appreciate you stopping and thinking about this and taking us seriously, our concerns. We don't know how this is going to turn out, but I want to thank, I met last week, Amy Saleh met with me, and met with Dana McDaniel to talk about the bigger issues we'll face, regardless of what we decide on this. And I think we all agreed we need to think broadly about the traffic things and everything, regardless of how we go in, have a lot of thinking to do. I just wanted to say quickly one thing. We've been looking up some things at Morpsey, and we haven't sent you all of our research. We'll sort of put it together and send it to you all at once through the end rather than dribble it out. But one of the things that interested us was seeing Morpsey study about where people who would be best served by riding the bus live. And if you take a look at Morpsey studies of persons with disabilities, it's the area right where we have our park and ride now, which is south of I-270 and over in the Bridge Street district. When you look at persons with 65 and older, it's the same area over here. And when we look at people who, households without a vehicle, it's the same area again. When we've talked about where we really need to put our park and ride, move it somewhere in the Bridge Street corridor. So that's the only piece of information I'd like to add tonight, and we'll be back to see you when you have a full hearing next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Okay, with that, I'll make a motion to postpone ordinance.
Excuse me, Mike.
Thank you.
I'd like to make
Go
a
ahead.
comment if I could, please.
Please.
Thank you. As a couple of my colleagues have already stated here this evening, the business decisions that CODA makes with respect to consolidating routes and where they place park and rides and so forth is largely beyond our control. If it was left up to me, you know, the number 30 Smoky Row route would stay. You know, I'm a former user of the Dale Drive Park and Ride, and I, you know, certainly appreciated that service, and it's evident to us how much you appreciate the service that is provided by the number 30. I am not completely able to follow some of the logic expressed by some of the different speakers this evening. It occurs to me that if Dublin didn't do this land swap with CODA and just did an outright purchase, as some have suggested, you know, they might move their park and ride if they could strike a deal with Walmart, you know, which is outside our jurisdiction, and still make the decision that the number 30 should be consolidated, you know, with that particular location. So another comment made that, you know, this is not for the exclusive benefit of Dublin residents, and, you know, that should be the standard by which we make an investment. And I guess I would ask folks to consider the investment, the multi-million-dollar investment we're making in the I-270-33 interchange, which is clearly not in the to the exclusive benefit of Dublin residents. It's going to benefit the region. So I'm not sure that that should be the primary standard by which we make decisions such as this. So we'll see how the process goes forward, and you know, but I'm certainly sympathetic to those individuals here this evening, you know, who are favor the maintenance of the number 30 Smoky Row route. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else? If not,
I'm
yes,
just
Amy?
wondering if in our communication with CODA, if we might pass along the fact that we had a lot of folks interested in Route 30 and interested in keeping Route 30, just, you know, by way of a letter or a memo to CODA, let them know that folks came here to let us know.
Certainly we'll do
so
that and
they
share
hear
the
that
minutes
message
and so
again.
forth.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, I will make a motion to postpone ordinance 4-15 until March 23rd. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ann.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Vice Mayor Gerber? Ms. Saleh? Mayor Keenan?
Yes. Okay. We have second reading, ordinance 5-15.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Aspen Energy Corporation to induce it to locate a main office and associated operations and workforce within the city. Authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
Good evening, members of council. No further information from the staff memo. However, we have a representative from Aspen Energy with us this evening to make a few comments. His name is Benson Pulfer. He's the regional manager for Aspen Energy.
Very good, welcome. You want to give us your name and address for the record?
Certainly. My name is Benson Pulfer. I live at 7076 out of Chase Boulevard in Powell, Ohio. I'm here as a representative of Aspen Energy Corporation. We're currently located in Powell as well, there in Shawnee Hills. We're excited based upon a lot of our growth that we've been able to experience within our company and the industry in general, due to the deregulation of both natural gas and electricity markets here in Ohio and other states in the Midwest and Eastern Seaboard, Texas, California, that we've been able to have a significant amount of growth, and we want to continue to grow with the opportunity to come here into Dublin. The opportunities that we're looking for here in Dublin is obviously to give more exposure to a lot of the clients that we serve, have a closer proximity to a lot of the interstates, 270 bypass, and then also, I think that we'll be able to find a very nice base of professional employees that we'll be able to bring on, looking to grow the business from currently at about 40 employees over 85 to 90 employees over the next couple of years. So.
Great. Very good. Anything else? Council questions? If not, I see we have some public testimony. Mr. Maurer?
I have a question with respect to the function of this company. And in order to get to it, I need to read to you from the memo the sentence which describes the function of the company. And that sentence is this: the company provides energy procurement and management services to a broad base of small businesses and commercial and industrial customers located across the U.S. in deregulated energy markets. The company maintains solid relationships with the top executives of many large publicly traded retail companies, and I take it these are retail companies selling energy. The kicker phrase, I think, in there is in deregulated energy markets. And my question is, does that mean that this company is providing energy to companies like coal and oil, as well as energy provided by solar and wind energy? That is, are they providing access to procurement to companies procuring energy all across the spectrum, from fixed coal over to solar and wind?
Okay. Like to address that? Certainly. You want to come forward to the podium, please? Thank you.
I'll try to sum this up with hopefully a brief answer. So we represent about 16 different suppliers of energy that are throughout the U.S. Some of the energy sources that you're commenting on, renewable energy sources such as wind and hydro, as well as solar, are part of the mix that our suppliers can offer. The amount that you may want is kind of dependent upon you as a consumer of energy. If you have a green initiative, then that's obviously something that we can offer. However, all of our suppliers meet any state requirement for renewable energy, such as here in the state of Ohio. I think there's an initiative that's currently on a freeze, but by 2025, there's a certain percentage of renewable and alternative energy sources. Again, it's up to suppliers, and they meet all those standards. For our end, we procure typically natural gas and electricity. The sources of that is, again, up to the supplier, and then we also can offer a demand response type strategy to help out other companies as well.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's yes, the
Okay. All right, any other council discussion? We'll vote on the ordinance.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Ordinance 6-15.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a real estate purchase agreement to acquire approximately 11.856 acres of property known as Kaltenbach Park from Washington Township.
Michelle?
Good evening, members of council. Washington Township approached the city several months ago regarding the interest to transfer this property, this parkland, to the city. The ordinance that you have before you this evening would authorize such a transfer to the city. And the effective date of this transfer would be March 11th, which is 30 days following the second reading of this second reading of the ordinance. This transfer is at no cost in exchange for the property, and it assumes that the city will maintain maintenance of the park. And I can answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Council questions? Anybody? Mr. Maurer?
Yeah, the arrangement is that the city can have the park provided it maintains it. Now, suppose the city wants to make some radical changes in it. Would that be allowed? I read the whole material, and they've got a heavy investment in that park. And to maintain it and to retain what they have is fine. But suppose the city now would like to make some radical changes in it. Is that part of the agreement?
Michelle?
Not knowing what you would mean by radical changes, there is a clause in here that this would remain as parkland for at least 10 years, and the city's intent is for it to always remain as parkland. We don't have any changes in mind to the facility or the site at this time. In fact, we're looking at some recreational programming that we can put into, there's 3 classrooms within the facility and also a summer camp. So our intent is to use the facility and the grounds as it currently is.
Yeah, I see that you've got plenty to work with there. There's no point in thinking of changes, but you're not, the administrations after you coming along who say, look, this is old stuff, let's do some new things in here.
I think leaving the flexibility, I mean, that's why the 10-year piece is in there. It's not that we want to make a change, but to provide future councils with the ability to have the options and flexibility.
So there is flexibility.
There is flexibility, yes, sir. Thank you. Council discussion? Ann?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Ms. Janice Zerker? Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Ordinance 8-15.
Amending Ordinance 11114, Schedule of Fees and Service Charges for City of Dublin Services, Appendix A, to establish fees for the rental of community space at Kaltenbach Park.
Very good. Matthew?
As Michelle alluded to, there are 2 structures basically in Kaltenbach Park, one of which is the community center. It has 3 separate classroom areas for rentable space, and there is a picnic shelter outside of the facility as well. Both of these facilities were looked at and compared to existing city rentable spaces that are in our inventory. So the fee structure before you is trying to keep things as consistent with our fee structure as they currently exist with like type of uses. So with that, I will tell you that it's important to note that we will be accommodating with this ordinance the existing users of that facility throughout 2015, those that have typically been fee waived for Washington Township. That is to help us transition and work with their schedules and their budgets in order to continue to accommodate them.
Very good. My understanding is some of the fees that the city is levying would be less than what the township had in place.
That's
is that
correct.
Accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Any council questions? Anybody?
Yeah, I'm curious, does the fees cover the maintenance of the structures that we're accepting?
We have done a brief analysis of the existing conditions of the facility. What we aren't currently capable of doing is telling you exactly what those costs are going to be until we actually operate it for a period of time. We have some estimates, and the cost recovery on these types of facilities is consistent with what we're already recovering in the City of Dublin facilities.
And that recovery's, that's basically at council direction some time ago. by way of
Correct.
ordinance.
50%.
Yeah, very good. Any other questions?
I'm just curious if maybe you could give us in a memo, a follow-up memo, who it is that uses these and if they're getting fee waivers so we can anticipate what might happen if we decide to charge them in the future. Who uses these on a regular basis? Just kind of who the user group is that uses this park, and that would be great. Thank you.
Dana and I learned at a presentation last week that there's a woodworking group that uses it. And we heard from them, didn't we, Dana? Yes, we did. Okay, anything else? Ann?
Mr. Nizzi Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 9-15.
Amending the annual appropriations ordinance for fiscal year ending December 31, 2015.
I'll introduce it. Thank you. Ms. Muma?
Good evening, members of council. This is a routine piece of legislation that we bring forward to you each year, which appropriates the balance of the tree funds that are within the general fund, as well as the debt service payments from all of our tax increment financing districts.
Okay.
I'll move to dispense with the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Ms. Salee? Yes. Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
And on the ordinance?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Salee? Yes. Mr. Peterson? Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Nizzi Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 10-15.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Garden City Group, Inc. to induce it to retain an office and associated operations and workforce within the city, and authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Clary?
Good evening. Garden City Group, currently located on Blazer Parkway. The company is a legal administrative services firm, and they specialize in the management of class action lawsuit settlements. The staff has been in discussions with the company as it considered where among its numerous domestic locations to locate the project, which will retain 152 jobs and create an additional 36 jobs by 2019. In support, the proposed economic development agreement includes a one-time $10,000 grant and a 7-year 12% performance incentive capped at $41,500. In regards to the lease term, my apologies, but there is a discrepancy between the memo and the agreement, but ultimately the proposal before you tonight is based upon a 5-year lease. And over the term of the agreement, the city expects to net approximately $425,236 in income tax withholdings, and a representative for the company will be at the February 23rd meeting. But I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Questions?
I have a couple.
Amy?
Yeah, Michael, we expect them to stay in their current location?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know, do they keep the same employees, or do they kind of, based on the cases that they're handling, do they cycle folks in and out?
They do have a mix of both, to respond to current project needs and a staff that is in place permanently as a regular full-time employee.
Okay, and I know, I guess I've been around long enough to remember when they came to Dublin and we did an incentive for them when they located here. In a follow-up memo for the next packet, could we get the facts and figures of exactly how much space they occupy, how many employees, how much tax revenue, what that former economic development agreement was? And then also, I'm curious about the $10,000 location grant. If they're staying where they are, do they need to update
Yeah,
technology or what?
and we will work on that memo, but to answer your question, the company has a data center in their facility, so technology infrastructure and the related type of activities, they're always needing to improve and catch up with their operations.
Would this be unique to them, or would it be for perhaps another tenant, future tenant of the building?
Well, there's a certain variable with data center equipment that there are some things that could go with the company, but also some things based on the equipment that could feasibly be permanent in the facility.
Right, I'm just wondering, like, they need more fiber or something, they
Yeah.
need whatever.
Yeah, we haven't got into complete specifics, but they've invested already quite a bit in building some generators and some other equipment, so
Gotcha.
it would
Okay, if
be
you could
more of
just
that.
detail that for
Okay, sure.
next time. Thank you, I'd
Yep.
appreciate that. That's all I have, thank you.
Anybody else? And you'll make the appropriate corrections for the next packet.
We'll do that, thank you.
Very good. Any other discussion? The second reading, public hearing will be on February 23rd. And with that, we'll move on to ordinance 12-15.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Ericer Inc. to induce it to locate an office and associated operations and workforce within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you.
Okay, so staff has been in discussions with Ericer Inc. regarding locating its operations in Dublin. Ericer is a newly formed firm set up to manage the administrative services of a family of companies, which includes 2 outside of Dublin and 1 located at the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. The company also, in addition to those companies, plans to perform business support services for outside clients as well. The project would locate 18 employees to Dublin this year and grow to 24 employees by 2021. The proposed economic development agreement includes a one-time $10,000 grant and a 10-year 10% performance incentive, which is capped at $39,500. In addition to meeting the withholdings, the incentives are contingent upon the purchase of a building in Dublin. The city expects to net approximately $325,836 in income tax withholdings over the term of the agreement. And again, a representative from the company will be present on the 23rd.
Very good. Council questions? Hearing none, there'll be a second reading, public hearing, February 23rd, council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to ordinance 12-15.
Authorizing the city to enter into a loan agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation and deliver a related note to the maximum principal amount of $35,010,000 for the purpose of paying the cost of constructing a Cloverstack interchange in the northeast and southeast quadrants of the existing U.S. Route 33 I-270 interstate interchange, together with related improvements and all necessary appurtenances thereto, authorizing execution of any additional documents related thereto, and declaring an emergency.
I'll
introduce it.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Muma?
Yes, members of council, this is the final piece of legislation that we will be bringing forward with you related to the State Infrastructure Bank loan for the 270-33 interchange. We did bring forward a piece of legislation in December that had the preliminary loan documents and authorized the agreement with ODOT, but they are requesting this final piece of legislation. The terms of the loan are what was articulated in that December memo. In essence, it's a $35 million loan, of which $25 million will be repaid by the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. The balance of the $10 million will be paid by the city of Dublin.
I move we dispense with the public hearing and treat it as an emergency.
There's a
Second.
Thank you. On the motion?
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Thank you. We're underway there. All right, I'm going to move to introduce resolution 17-15 through 22-15, and suspend council rules of order in order to consider resolution 17-15 through 22-15 together. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ann?
Ms. Salee? Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? These are Resolution 1715, relates to 4-5s LLC, 6300 Riverside Drive. Resolution 1815, it's MR/TSA RR Owner LLC, 4305 to 4335 West Dublin Granville Road. Resolution 1915 is Patrick W. Heitzman, 6332, 6350 Riverside Drive. Resolution 2015 is Rivers Edge 1, 6371 Riverside Drive. Resolution 2115, Karen Michelle R. Friedman, 6310 Riverside Drive. Resolution 2215 is River Park Group LLC, 6400 Riverside Drive.
Thank you. And staff report, Megan?
Good evening, members of council. The city is preparing to improve the intersection at State Route 161 and Riverside Drive by building a roundabout, which will include pedestrian and bicycle facilities. This improvement will provide for a safer and more efficient intersection, as well as improving the aesthetics of the area. As a part of the project, A shared use path connection is built on the east side of Riverside Drive. I'm trying to use the mouse to point. So it's between the intersection of Riverside and 161 down to the path at Martin Road. So this is a piece of bike path connection that'll be built as a part of the intersection project. City must obtain property interest on 8 more parcels to build this project, 6 of which are on the council agenda tonight. We have obtained appraisals, made good faith offers, and are hopeful that amicable resolutions will be reached with the property owners. However, these resolutions do begin the eminent domain process in the event that negotiations are unsuccessful. We plan on bringing the acquisition of the 2 remaining parcels before council in later February or early March, and the project's planned to bid in March with construction activities beginning in April. Staff recommends approval of resolution numbers 17 through 2215 as the construction of the project is necessary and to keep the project moving forward on schedule. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Megan. Council questions? Anybody?
I just want to say that I have noticed a few citizens that are walking in the street. So I think that, you know, the sooner we can get all this done, I think the safer it'll be for people. Agree.
Very good. Ann?
Ms. Salee? Yes. Mr. Lechleiter?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber? And Mr. Peterson?
Very good, thank you. Okay, we have a presentation, staff presentation on arts and public places on the site selection policy, and I see we have Kurt Getman. Mr. Getman?
Good evening, members of council. In preparing for the next Art in Public Places project, staff have identified the need for a formal policy for the citing of these works of public art. This was sent to you in a packet on January 22nd. A lot of factors were considered in developing the policy that we're recommending, such as visibility, public safety, historical significance, and national best practices for creative placemaking. We've also incorporated feedback and ideas from the Dublin Arts Council, the general public, and you yourselves. Most recently, in response to feedback from council, language to provide notice to residents potentially affected by forthcoming public art adjacent to proposed sites. Respectfully, we are recommending council's adoption of this policy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Questions? Early?
Yes, last meeting, I recommended that we add it in the procedure section for number 1, that we add that the Dublin City Council representative to the Dublin Arts Council also be a member of this team, and it's not been changed. I was wondering, was there a reason for it not being included? Because I thought we had, I thought the council had agreed that's what they wanted to ensure that.
I think that's a great idea. I would assume we can amend this.
We gave direction, I think.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, anything you want to? No, okay.
Okay.
Can
So
add
you'll
that
fix
in,
that?
certainly,
We'll get that
yeah.
in.
So it'd be in advance of initiating an art in public places project or call for artists, City of Dublin and, comma, City Council member and Dublin Arts Council staff. I guess that would be sort of what it would be. Because we have a representative from City Council to the arts program. We presume that's who it would be, but we don't need to articulate that definitively here.
Sure, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So I see we have some public testimony here, Mr. Maurer.
Before we do that, could I make a comment?
That's all right.
Thanks. Under the selection criteria, I mean, I think it's deliberately intended to allow for a fair amount of discretion, and, you know, we're trying to strike a balance here. I just want to point out, maybe it's just me, you know, that 1 and 4, you know, there seem to be some inherent contradictions between the two.
I'm glad that you caught that, and I'd like to address that. The selection criteria is supposed to be flexible for lots of different types of art, and no one form of art could actually hit all of these selection criteria. There's everything from, we have that dancing hares on the top of a hill, highly visible, to fiberglass men and trees hidden in nooks and crannies of Kaufman Park. And both of these are great locations for public art, but for slightly different reasons. So the selection criteria isn't necessarily a score sheet to go by to you know, find something that might hit 5 of 7 of these or a majority, but things to think about in looking for creative places to cite public art.
And I think I understood that. I just wanted that to be clear for the public, you know, that it is not a score sheet, you know, because it would be virtually impossible in some instances, I think, to locate art otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I'll move that we adopt this.
We got public testimony.
Okay.
Mr. Maurer?
Including all the comments that have just made, I think the recommendations for establishing art in public places is very well thought out. But it's been years since I've brought up in a linguistic issue. I've got to do it here. And I'm going to ask you to turn, please, in the memo to background, paragraph 2, sentences 1 and 2. This relates to a word which, about 2% of people speaking English get straight without worrying about it, and they're 2% plus those who have a Greek background. The word is, the word here concerned is criterion and criteria. It's a Greek-rooted word, and the singular form ends in ion, and the plural form ends in a, so that your first sentence is right, and that paragraph 2, and the second sentence, you were wrong in using it, whoever used it. So criterion singular, criteria plural. And if you know Latin, of course, you tend to mix it up with the Latin A ending as plural. So that's my, I'll give you my bill in the morning for this.
Very good.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to adopt the policy subject to the addition of the council member that Mayor Lee had described earlier.
Second.
And fixing the criterion, apparently.
That's not in the ordinance.
We have a second.
A second.
Mrs. Zerker?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Lecklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Getman, thank you. I don't think we've met, and have they been hiding you back there in the city
I'm hiding
building?
at the service center. I'll try to be more public.
Okay, very good. All right, that brings us to a presentation on the new community authority. It's an informational presentation, and it looks like Ms. Muma is going to enlighten us.
Members of council, we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening about economic development tools as they pertain to the Bridge Street District. As council is aware, there are many different economic development tools that are available to municipalities under the Ohio Revised Code. Dublin has used a number of these. Tax increment financing, or TIF, is probably the most widely recognized tool here in Dublin. Through last year, what we'll be reporting on to the state this year, we have 28 active TIF districts, and there are some that were approved over the course of the last year that haven't yet gone through the state process yet, so there's more than 28 that exist today. Those service payments generated in those TIF districts have created over $100 million worth of public improvements in the areas surrounding those TIF districts. Council is also very familiar with performance-based payroll incentives and grants. You heard a couple of them tonight, for example. We currently have 40 companies that have active economic development agreements in place that, based on their performance, we give them some sort of performance-based incentive. Another common tool is tax abatements that are authorized within community reinvestment areas, or CRAs. The city has utilized this tool, albeit in the past couple of decades. The Britton Parkway and Tuttle Crossing CRAs were established in the mid-1990s. Finally, new to Dublin, though, but not new to Central Ohio, is the use of new community authorities, or NCAs. As the property owner and developer for a large part of the land within the Bridge Street District, Crawford Hoyne has been working with staff on their development plans, which have been presented to council in recent weeks. Additionally, they have been working with staff through the financials in order to make this project a reality. Based on the developer's request, the city is requesting the establishment of a number of districts or entities to fund public parking structures and 2 community facilities within their development. First would be tax increment financing, and ultimately we would expect to create 2 TIF districts, one under Chapter 5709 5709.40 of the Ohio Revised Code and one under 5709.41 of the Ohio Revised Code. As a reminder, this is similar to the action taken with the development of Tuller Flats with Casto that we implemented at the end of last year. As a reminder, those TIF revenues created under the 40 TIF can be used to fund public infrastructure improvements, while those under Chapter 41 can be used to fund private improvements. Additionally, we would expect that we will implement a community reinvestment area, which can abate property taxes for a period up to 15 years within the defined area. Finally, we would expect, and what we will go into more detail tonight, is the establishment of a new community authority. That will invoke a service charge which will allow for revenue streams to come in to pay the debt service on these parking structures and other community facilities. Again, the following slides will go more into the process of creating a new community authority and what all is entailed with it and what exactly a new community authority is. However, there will be an overarching agreement that will really override everything, and that is the economic development agreement. And that's consistent with how we've handled development, public-private partnerships in the past, where an economic development agreement is in place that defines the overall business terms and responsibilities of the city and of the developer. It would provide the framework for the utilization of TIFs, CRAs, and NCAs for the implementation of their project at Bridge Park. As we go through this presentation this evening and as we go through council action that's going to be requested in the upcoming weeks, it's important to recognize that if at the end of the day the city does not come to terms with the developer, Crawford Hoyne, through an economic development agreement, the other proposed tools, even if they have been authorized by council, will ultimately not be implemented. Each one of those tools that we've listed above will come back to council for further consideration and discussion. So since council is familiar with CRAs and tax increment financing, we want to focus this evening on the new community authority. A new community authority, or NCA, is authorized under Chapter 349 of the Ohio Revised Code. The statutory purpose of an NCA is to encourage the orderly development of a well-planned, diversified, and economically sound new community. And by definition, within the code, a new community can include facilities for the conduct of industrial, commercial, residential, cultural, educational, and recreational activities. It is important to note that a new community authority is a separate public body governed by a board of trustees that may oversee the development of public infrastructure improvements and those community facilities. The board of trustees is generally 7 to 13 members, of which the city of Dublin, for any NCA established within the city of Dublin, City Council would appoint 3, but not more than 6 citizen members plus 1 local government representative. And then the developer would appoint a number of members equal to the number of citizen members. So what you will see, what we expect with the Bridge Park New Community Authority is that there would be 7 members, 3 citizen members appointed by Dublin City Council, plus a local government representative, and 3 appointed by the developer. An NCA does not have the power over zoning and subdivision regulations, the provision of police and fire services, or the distribution of water or sewer treatment or disposal. So what can a new community authority do? Well, they have the ability to purchase real or personal property. They can improve and sell real or personal property as well as community facilities, provide recreational, educational, health, social, vocational, cultural activities primarily for residents of the district. They can collect service fees to cover community development programs. They can enforce collection of a community development charge, which we will go into on the next slide, as well as issue debt and pay costs of operation and maintenance of community facilities. Before we go on to what exactly is a new community development charge, I want to point out that under an NCA that issues debt to pay costs, that is not the city paying the debt. It is not the city taking on the risk of that debt. So there's no city backing of this debt because the NCA is its own separate entity, it protects the city in the event something would go wrong. So what is a community development charge? Community development charge runs with the land by way of a real estate declaration. It may be calculated a number of ways, some of those being uniform fees based on property values, income levels, profits, gross receipts, or a certain combination thereof. In this particular case, since we expect Crawford Hoyne to request a community reinvestment area, or CRA, which would abate the property taxes for up to 15 years, we would expect that during that 15-year time period, the community development charge would be at an amount similar to what those property owners would pay if the taxes were not abated. It is not a property tax, however. Unpaid charges can become a lien on the property against which it is charged and collected in the same manner as property taxes. Within Bridge Park, the ability for the NCA to levy this charge provides a funding mechanism which then can be used to pay that debt service on those facilities, as well as the cost of operating and maintaining those community facilities. A community development charge provides a developer with more flexibility than TIF revenue does. As council's aware, TIF revenues are based on purely assessed valuation that is determined by the county auditor. So over time, there are fluctuations with assessed valuation, and those TIF revenues can become somewhat unpredictable. However, with an NCA charge, you can determine a very predictable revenue stream that's going to be collected by levying that charge, which is then it's attractive to investors that are going to be purchasing debt that's using this type of financing. Additionally, there's timing considerations when you are talking about TIF revenues. TIFs are generating revenue once improvements are made to a parcel, and then there's a year lag based on when the county auditor gets those improvements on the tax duplicate. So in the case of an NCA, they can levy that charge day one as soon as the declaration is filed with the property. So for those reasons, an NCA charge is more attractive than other financing mechanisms that have been used in the past here. Examples of existing NCAs throughout Central Ohio are listed above. One of the most notable is the New Albany Community Authority that was created decades ago. I've listed there 2 that exist in Powell, a couple that exist in Columbus, and then the Pinnacle Community Infrastructure Finance Authority that exists in Grove City. As a public entity, all NCAs are audited and go through the same audit requirements as do any other public body. In order to create a new community authority, the developer that owns and controls the land within the defined area files a petition to create an NCA district. I'm going to refer to that as the petition as we move forward through this. That petition is filed with 2 entities. One with the proximate city, and then the second with the Organizational Board of Commissioners. With respect to the proximate city, it's important to note that because of state changes that are set to expire on March 21st of 2015, NCAs established prior to that time, the proximate city would be the city of Dublin. After March 21st, 2015, the proximate city would become the city of Columbus. In either situation, the Organizational Board of Commissioners is the city of Dublin. When that petition is filed with those 2 entities, the petition must address 8 items. 1, the name of the NCA, the address of the NCA, a map and full description of the boundaries of the NCA, including a description of the properties within the boundaries that will be excluded from the NCA, a statement of the current and proposed zoning, a current plan of development, a suggested number of members of the Board of Trustees, again ranging anywhere from 7 to 13, a preliminary economic feasibility analysis, including provision of public services, and finally, a statement that the development will comply with all environmental laws. Once that petition is filed with those 8 items in it, the proximate city must give approval of that petition. So in this case, it would either be the City of Dublin or the City of Columbus, depending on the timing. Then the Organizational Board of Commissioners, Dublin, would determine whether the form of petition is sufficient in accordance with Ohio Revised Code. If it is determined to be sufficient, meaning if it meets or it has addressed those 8 items that I previously listed on the slide, the Organizational Board of Commissioners must, 1, accept the petition, and then 2, set a date for public hearing on the actual creation of the authority, which must occur 30 to 45 days after the petition is filed. That public hearing is held, after which time the Organizational Board of Commissioners must determine whether the authority will ultimately be conducive to the public health, safety, convenience, or welfare, and will result in the intended development. This finding is affirmed by passage of an ordinance establishing the authority. Given the fact that there are expiration of this state law effective March 21st, 2015, which in essence we'll call the proximity issue, we have outlined for you 2 different options. The first is if we want to try to get something established prior to the March 21st expiration, meaning we would not need to involve the City of Columbus in this process. This is the time frame that we would expect. At some point this week, we expect the developer to file the petition for organization of an NCA with the City of Dublin. On February 17th, at a special meeting, which is a week from tomorrow night, City of Dublin would approve or consider for approval an ordinance which would do 3 things. 1, determine the sufficiency of the petition. So did it meet those 8 issues articulated? 2, authorizes the execution of the petition, and 3, sets the date for a public hearing for the creation of the authority. We would request at that point that that piece of legislation be adopted as an emergency on that evening next Tuesday. After that, a public hearing would be held the week of March 16th regarding the creation of the authority, after which time the Dublin City Council would consider approving the ordinance which authorizes the creation of the authority, and then it would appoint their 4 members to serve on the NCA Board of Trustees. Again, in order to get this in place by the March 21st deadline, we would be requesting a waiver of 2nd reading and emergency language at this meeting as well. The other time frame that we've outlined here for you is if we don't want to take into consideration the proximate city issue and just let this piece of legislation work without regard to the March 21st deadline. So if Crawford Hoyne submitted a petition either this week or next week, they would file it with both the City of Dublin as well as the City of Columbus. So City of Columbus would be named as the proximate city, and in Dublin would be the Organizational Board of Commissioners. We would request that Council of Dublin have first reading of the ordinance to approve the petition on February 23rd. And if you recall in the previous slide, this step had 3 parts to it. This one just has 2. Determining the sufficiency, did it meet those 8 criteria, and setting the date for the public hearing. On March 22nd, it is anticipated that the developer would request approval of an ordinance from Columbus City Council as the proximate city. I have this step in the process indicated with a star because this is the area that is outside our control. So the developer would be requesting it of Columbus, but there is no statutory requirement for them to allow this to move forward or not allow it to move forward. Assuming Columbus City Council did pass the ordinance as the proximate city, we would then request that you, as City Council, have 2nd reading of the ordinance to approve the petition as that Organizational Board of Commissioners. We would request this be passed as emergency legislation. Then we would bring forward legislation on April 6th to have first reading to create the authority, followed by April 20th, a public hearing of the authority, and then at the same time, second reading of the ordinance that creates the authority, as well as appointing the 4 individuals. Based on the unknown of what might happen if this has to go to city council for the city of Columbus, staff is recommending to approve the steps necessary to create the new community authority by March 21st of 2015, so it's in place before those state provisions expire. This allows the city of Dublin to reserve the right to be the proximate city. The legislation that would be requesting next Tuesday would simply be based solely on whether it meets the requirements of ORC 349. That's why it is called the sufficiency ordinance. The ordinance approving the creation of the authority, which we would expect at that mid-March timeframe, would include language that would dissolve the new community authority if an economic development agreement is not approved by Dublin City Council. So there are going to be measures in place that should this development not move forward for zoning reasons, for economic development reasons, that any legislation that we would have brought forward previously to you to create the new community authority, to create any other special districts, that those would dissolve if the economic development agreement would not be approved by City Council. If council determines it at any point not to move forward, and we would request Crawford Hoyne to go regroup and look at things differently, the option of filing the petition with the City of Columbus still stands. There's nothing that takes away the developer's right to request that of the City of Columbus. Dublin still would exercise in that scenario, even if Columbus was the proximate city, the same level of oversight in appointing authority. So it would still be City of Dublin appointees on the NCA board, even if Columbus is considered the proximate city. City Council will also be considering additional legislation pertaining to this project, as I mentioned earlier. We would expect to bring forward 2 ordinances which authorize TIF districts under the 2 chapters I discussed earlier, authorizing the establishment of the community reinvestment area, as well as authorizing the execution of the economic development agreement. By no means does anything discussed this evening lend itself that the developer doesn't need to follow any City of Dublin rules and regulations. Without a doubt, the developer must follow all procedures and regulations for the city to secure the needed development reviews and approvals for Bridge Park. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have Chris Franzman with Squire Patton Boggs, who has worked with us on this project, as well as a number of other economic development projects, for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Most of this council's been researching this in various ways. We've kind of been involved. Let me congratulate you on putting a very complex set of material together in a format that's really, really well done. I presume your staff also deserves some congratulations as well. Council questions?
No, I just have a comment. I just want to say that, with this, city is not putting up its tax money in jeopardy or in its financial situation, and as many cities has, as Arlington has. And it's a very interesting and positive possible scenario for the development of Bridge Street. So congratulations on the hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, John, that I think one of the most important things that you said, besides the process, is that there is no risk to the city. And I think that's what our job is as council, is to ensure that our risk is limited, if not, as limited as it can be in a financial sense. So if I understand all of this correctly, that is what this does for us.
Anybody else?
Mike, just a couple quick questions. What's the functional difference between Columbus being the proximate city and Dublin being the proximate city?
I don't know that there's a real good answer to that. It's a quirk in the law that in this 3-year time period between March 21st of 2012 through March 21st of 2015, it shifted the proximate city. So prior to March 21st of 12 and now after March 21st of 2015, it goes back to being the largest city in the county in which it occurs.
It's an expiration of some legislation that took place 3 years ago or whatever.
That is correct.
And it's the sunsetting, if I understand it, that creates sort of this quicker pace or the sense of urgency, I guess, that
Yes.
it's inherent in the law. It has nothing to do with anything that we have done.
That is correct. It's unfortunate that we are really victims of the law, the sunset in the law that necessitates this process.
And after that initial determination is made of what the proximate city is, that's, their job is just to certify that these 8 criteria are met. Then once that's done, Dublin's role would be exactly the same.
Actually, the sufficiency still resides with Dublin.
This is even a step before
It is
that.
simply them signing off as proximate city, which is a legislative action that would be necessary by the city of Columbus.
So in either case, at the end of the day, the appointing authority and any oversight and everything else still remains with the city of Dublin.
That is correct.
And maybe I'm getting too far into the weeds, but in the 8 criteria that you mentioned, it's on page 5 of your presentation, it seems like about 5 of the 8 are almost checking off boxes. They're relatively easy to set, like the name. That wouldn't be too hard to satisfy. Some of these, though, seem to get into a little bit more specificity. For example, the code, the current zoning, I imagine that's the code that we have. But the next one, the plan of development. How will we know whether or not their plan of development satisfies that requirement? Is that something that we would do at the next hearing, or when would we learn?
Certainly, and you can be assured that when that petition is filed with the city, before it even comes to you for consideration, we would make sure that it indeed meets the criteria necessary. We would not, it would not be in the best interest of the city or for the developer's sake to bring forward something that wouldn't be complete.
And is this, and I guess I'm just sort of curious about that, the plan of development this isn't going to be a site plan that's going to somehow determine, the other decisions that we've made and the different things that have come forward. This isn't circumventing any of that process or changing that process, is it?
Hold on one moment. No, nothing would change what your site plan review that you have done at previous council meetings.
Okay.
No, these are simply what they are expecting to construct, but not from an architectural standpoint, nothing to the level that you reviewed at your last meeting and that you will be seeing at later periods of time, or planning and zoning would be seeing as well.
Okay.
It's more of like a 30,000 foot, we're going to
Yes.
build this building here and this building here, and this building's going to contain these uses, or does it even get that detailed?
It's very broad.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
And then just my last question, one of those bullet points there is the economic feasibility analysis. If we have not yet sort of come to an agreement on what the arrangements are going to be, and if we made one agreement, it would be economically feasible, and if we don't buy into that agreement, maybe it wouldn't be, how do we analyze whether it's sufficient or not?
Sure. Again, this would be a very broad, very general statement that would speak to how they expect the community development charge to be levied, how that decision is going to be made, as well as what those charges would be used for. So we would expect that to say operating and maintenance of the community facilities and the parking structures, and as well as debt service on those facilities. So again, very broad language that doesn't tie our hands. There will be nothing in this document that would tie our hands in the future with respect to the economic development agreement or any other decisions that City Council might have before them.
And just one other quick one, Mike. It mentions in here that this authority would collect and then spend the community development charge, but you also mentioned that could be collected more quickly than a TIF type of funding. Can that be investor money that's put into that, or is this funds that are generated by the development itself?
It's generated by the development itself. It is assessed on the properties within the new community authority.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay,
Amy?
so when you talk about the word tax abatement, that always gets our attention, as it should. But basically, it's not that there isn't going to be anything paid, it's just instead of a tax, a property tax, it's the community development charge.
That is correct.
Okay, and then that's collected and that's used to pay for what?
It's used to pay for the debt service on, in this case, it would be the parking structures as well as the 2 community facilities, a performing arts center and a community, one other community facility, sorry, the name's escaping me right now, and then the operation and maintenance of those those structures as well. So it's very, very concentrated. These charges will not be able to be used for anything other than what is articulated within these documents and a very, very narrow definition of what those funds can be used for.
That third one is a proposed event center.
Yes.
The event center, gotcha. Okay, and so the debt service, ultimately, it's not city debt,
That is correct.
so there's no taxpayer dollars on the line, it's just investor dollars.
That is correct.
And who do you think will hold the debt?
We would expect at this point for the Columbus-Franklin County Finance Authority to issue that debt, and then investors will be purchasing that.
Gotcha, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Tim?
And just to be clear, to the extent that there was this reference made to the term abatement, that by virtue of the agreement that the city reached with the Dublin schools will continue to receive an amount roughly equal to the amount that they've received to date.
Actually, good question. This area is within the defined area of the Bridge Street Cooperative Agreement that we entered into with Dublin Schools and Tolles Career Center a little over a year ago now. And as if you recall, that allows us to create any type of incentive district within this defined area. In return for that, in years 1 through 15, we can collect 100% of any TIF revenues generated. And in years 16 through 30, we can collect 90%. So the schools would get 10% of what they would have otherwise received. In exchange
In addition
for that,
there too.
Right.
correct. So in exchange for that, we are compensating the school district at $1.5 million each year, and then tolls with a proportional part of that. So this is in alignment with what the cooperative agreement with both those entities outlined, and the school will still be receiving their $1.5 million payment each year.
So put another way, the Dublin Schools districts and tolls will receive no less than what they've been receiving to date. Is that accurate?
Both districts will receive the same amount, 1.5, we'll just say, we'll use Dublin City Schools, for example, $1.5 million a year, in years 1 through 15, regardless if there's an abatement in place or not an abatement in place, because that agreement says that if we would establish a TIF, the city of Dublin can collect 100% of those revenues during that time. So this really doesn't impact the school district at all.
But it's noteworthy if the ground was vacant or just land, that they would just be receiving taxes on land only.
That
So,
is correct.
At the end of the day, they're probably well ahead. And I know that the money, as I recall, was going to be used for technology and within the school system.
That's my understanding, they're very pleased with you.
They were very pleased with the agreement.
And it could be argued that at some point well into the future that the school district will receive quite a windfall.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And the authority can be written in such a finite way that it actually gets down to the maintenance of the structures to protect everybody's investment.
That is correct. We will want to make sure that all of these facilities are maintained in a manner that's consistent with what we would expect for any other facility within the city of Dublin.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's really a clever program, and it's really succinctly, you could say that you can pull the taxpayers' chestnuts out of the fire, and for a really expansive, complex program that few cities have ever attempted. This is a really clever way to try to get it developed without putting our people on the line. So congratulations again.
Okay, anybody else?
I would, thank you. If we approve this authority, that's just the beginning of a process, and the way I'm looking at it, Angel. And we have to dig down very deeply and see what this economic development agreement is going to be. Also, it's going through the planning and zoning process. We may or may not like what they come up with ultimately in terms of architectural design and all those sort of things. So are you saying that if we are unhappy with the economic development agreement or any aspect of the development from the planning zoning commission, then we can dissolve this authority?
That is correct. Even on the piece of legislation, so next Tuesday you would be considering that sufficiency ordinance, which really is a non-discretionary. It's just, did they adhere to the 8 items? But then the second piece of legislation is that mid-March timeframe where you would be acting on an ordinance to establish the authority. That ordinance itself will have a provision in there that should an economic development agreement not be entered into, that the new community authority would be nullified.
Okay. And I understand the authority will set up the mechanism by which to collect fees to maintain these public facilities that will be on this property, parking garages, the event center, that sort of thing. Now, with respect to the economic development agreement, that will get to the actual meat of the deal, so to speak, where we will be able to examine to what extent this developer can perform and do this building.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There's a lot of devil in the details in terms of the community authority agreement as well. Is that something we can also, we'll have input on? If we don't like that, that's yet another fail-safe.
That's correct.
Okay, so there's 2 fail-safes. The community authority actual agreement and then the economic development agreement.
Yeah, just really, if you don't mind, just like to really point out that by having a special meeting on February 17th, that's next Tuesday, we have adequate time to advertise that, make the public aware in accordance with your own rules. Just want to point out, really the key here is to preserve this option. I think that's really critical for this council to preserve its options going forward. You'll have many times to revisit this, as Angel did a great job of pointing out, between the CRA, the 2 TIF agreements, the economic development agreement, the final petition ordinance, and so forth. Even if you passed the final petition ordinance before you passed an EDA, that final petition ordinance would have language in it, as we pointed out, that would say that that EDA must be approved in order for an NCA to go forward, or the zoning would have to be approved as well. So there's a lot of fail-safes in this. I think a lot of decision points that council still would have in its possession, and that we'll continue to check in with you on these decision points. And if, for some reason, and we'll work very hard, very diligently to try to keep Dublin as the proximate city and keep that authority here locally, we'll do everything we can to do that. If that can't happen for some reason, you still got the option with Columbus. So,
okay,
just want to make sure to reiterate.
The only thing I would add is I think it's very important that we get this information out to the public. Obviously, this is something new and different, so we need to make sure that we very carefully articulate exactly what this is and what it is not, so that the public is aware.
Absolutely, and
What the
we really
proposal is.
appreciate your allowing us to give you this presentation this evening on this part of your agenda. I want to thank Angel and Chris Franzman and Terry and others who contributed to getting this together. I think they did a great job of,
Yeah, they did.
of summarizing it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next steps then? We've pretty much covered all that ground? I think
Well, just
so.
to be clear, so it is clear that we'll have a special meeting then next Tuesday. I would defer to Ann in regards to maybe the time for that, because I know you also have a joint meeting with the Architectural Review Board. What time is that set to start?
That's scheduled for 6:30. We could move that to 7 and do this at 6.
Council meeting.
Mhm.
So what kind of time frame are you looking for the special meeting?
Well, I would think we would probably need no more than a half hour, so could we convene at 6?
Council, does that work for everybody?
I wonder if it might be good to allow extra time, just in case,
Could be public input.
Yeah.
there would be public input and, assuming we'll have questions. I know it's difficult for some to get here.
We could start at 6 and ask to back up the start of the ARB meeting to perhaps 7, if that's okay. I know some people have to get here from downtown and so forth.
We can be here at 5, so whatever works for everybody.
You have time to advertise and do
We
everything
do,
we need
we
to do
do.
there. Council, is that all right?
It's cool.
Okay, so we'll start at 6, and you'll
Sure.
advise the ARB board that we're starting that at 7,
7, okay.
right?
If you don't mind, I'd just like to also kind of get out in front. Let's assume for a second, I kind of hate to do that, but we probably ought to be leaning ahead on follow-up meeting. Assume that you were to pass this next Tuesday. As Angel mentioned, there's a 30-day time frame in which you need to do the follow-up public hearing and consider the petition ordinance. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that meeting would, in order to make this 21st deadline, that meeting would have to happen on March the 19th. So we will get word out to you, and of course there'll be another subsequent council meeting. We can reiterate that date and time, but just wanted to kind of put
That's
that
fine.
on your radar screen.
We can talk about that next week. It's a special meeting. Okay? All right then. Good job. Thank you. All right, staff comments?
Yes, well, it's been an exciting first week. I appreciate, I want to thank you again for the great reception last week. That was very kind. I appreciate that a lot. Appreciate everyone who came out for that. At your desk, there is a memo that was initiated by Colleen Gilger, our Director of Economic Development. I apologize this did not make it into your packet, but we were finalizing her travel arrangements. As you know, Columbus 2020 leads our global engagement program for economic development. We do participate in their activities on occasion. This memo outlines that Colleen will be accompanying them to Japan in late February, early March. They will do also, while they're there, a visit to China. They're trying to make the best of their flights while they're in the region. The point of that is we have 21 Japanese companies, and it's critical that we engage those companies in the homeland. And what Columbus 2020 has done is arrange numerous meetings to engage new companies that we don't yet know. I've made this trip myself personally, as you know. It is a tough trip. You really are on the run the whole time you're there. I'm glad to see Colleen be invited and be able to go to this. So I think that likewise in China we'll do the same thing. As you know, we host delegations when they come here and host companies as well. So I know that you have supported this in past budgets. We did not execute this last year, but are doing that this year. Later in the year, I just want to make you aware that the Midwest U.S.-Japan Association Conference will be held in Tokyo, and there may well be a follow-up to that engagement. That is one that I would like city council members to consider, perhaps sending one of your own to attend that on the engagement. I think it would be great for you to participate in that as well. So just wanted to make sure that you saw that, and that was on your radar screen. One other quick announcement. As you know, it's that time of year to announce the Grand Leprechaun. And last week, all the Grand Leprechauns, former Grand Leprechauns, got together for their selection. The mayor and the city manager get to sit in on that. First time I got to do that. It was a lot of fun. And got a lot of great nominations. There were several nominations. I think there were 5 nominations, as I recall. And I tell you, great people, you know, who've done a lot for the community. Then they take a vote. They present. Those are nominations from the public. They review those nominations, and then a vote is taken. And this year, the vote was taken, and former council member Bob Adamick has been chosen as this year's new Grand Leprechaun. So I just wanted to make
Great
that announcement.
leprechaun he will make.
And you know, that was based on Bob's activities in the community. It's overwhelming, all that he's done between being a council member, formerly president of the Wyndham Village Homeowners Association, board member of the Dublin Foundation, and trustee for Coventry Woods Civic Association. He has served as president or vice chair and chair, and I served on that board as well. So I know the amount of effort he put into what was formerly called the Dublin Counseling Center, which is now called Centero. He's done an amazing amount of work for that. He's volunteered as the basketball and soccer coach for Dublin Youth Athletics, served as a flag post volunteer for the Field of Honor, and as a member of the Dublin City Council, as I mentioned, and served 2 years as vice mayor. So He's heavily involved in the Dublin Irish Festival. He and his wife were previously recognized at the Emerald Ball for their contributions. So just like we have in this community, so many dedicated citizens who give their time to this community, and he's a great example of that. So our congratulations to Bob Adamick on the selection as Grand Leprechaun. And with that, that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Nope, I'm sure there'll be an appropriate press release this coming Thursday.
Yes.
And I know our staff is working on that as well. That brings us to council committee reports. Planning and zoning rep, Amy?
We had really our first regular planning commission meeting on February 5th with the new members, and it was quite a lengthy agenda, lots of mixed things, and I thought was hoping we'd go easy on our new appointees, but we didn't, in fact, but they performed very well under the pressure. They all contributed and did a great job, and we ended up, as you know, tabling the conditional use for CODA, approving the rezoning for that piece of ground. In addition to that, there was a preliminary plat approved for Bridge Park East, and there were a couple other minor projects and some city projects. So it was a really good agenda, and we've got some trainings coming up, and I would invite any council member who wanted to come in and listen in on the training or just come and say hello. I think the BZA, ARB, and Planning Commission are all invited to attend those, and the dates are in our packets. So with that,
Good.
That's the report from planning.
Admin committee, Rick?
Thank you. On your desk is a proposed agenda for the goal-setting retreat scheduled for March 26 and March 27. If you look on top here, it should be Thursday and Friday, not Friday and Saturday. I'd ask all of you to take a look at this and get back to me by the, I guess our next meeting, the 23rd, and we'll get this finalized. We took everybody's comments. I think it's a rather aggressive agenda, but I think also a very thorough one as well. We've also thought of Ginny Barney as being our facilitator. She has experience dealing with city councils, and I think she can be very helpful to keep our discussions moving along. Also, we're looking for locations, both for the dinner and also for Friday. So if there's thoughts, certainly please get a hold of me and we'll take them into consideration. The other is we have some board and commission positions that are coming open here in April 1st. Some are eligible, and I think you also have that list before you.
We do.
Some are eligible for reappointment, some are not. And thinking out loud here, Marilee and Greg, maybe a brief administrative committee meeting before our meeting on the 23rd. Everybody is obviously welcome to attend.
Actually not going to be here on the 23rd.
Okay. Well, what I'm thinking of is a time, because Ann needs to get, if we're going to advertise, we have to do that by such a date. What would that date be, Ann?
Well, fairly soon. It depends on when you do your interviews in March. So we can do the appointments on March 23rd, so going back from that.
How much time do you need to?
I'd say we should have two weeks out
Couple
there.
weeks, okay, okay. Yeah, so the 9th would be probably a little late. March 9th would be late to convene. Okay.
Right.
If everybody has their list, maybe let's communicate and figure out which ones where we want to go with this. Okay. And we'll let you know by the 23rd. That would give you plenty of time. Okay. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you, Rick. Community Development Committee, John?
I noticed that we have a potential meeting coming up with a resident, and I was just I was wondering when Greg and Amy might be available for that.
Yet another meeting.
Yes. Or you guys could submit that to Ann, and then I could call this particular individual that we're going to be meeting with and find a common, if you could come up with a common date, I will accommodate that.
And maybe you could poll us
I will do that.
based on when our other meetings are,
Right.
Okay.
since we have no other lives.
Yeah.
Anytime we're not meeting here, we'll
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Finance, Merle? Thank you. Public Services, Amy?
We need to get on the calendar, Tim and John, another meeting to discuss the HOA maintenance fees and,
July 4th?
and the July 4th event as well. So perhaps we could schedule one meeting and do both.
Well, there's a thought.
That'd be pretty crazy. But, you know, both of them obviously are, well, the one is, said we wanted to do it in the first quarter. So maybe in the next couple.
Critical
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
No, that's fine. Let's do two of them at the same night and get them out of the way. That's what you're suggesting.
Yes, do two topics. Okay, Ann, if you could poll us for that, and then staff will need to be aware of when we schedule because they're intimately involved in both topics.
So you'll have some materials from staff, I would presume, with respect
Absolutely.
to July 4.
Both.
Staff will be prepared to deal with that.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
I haven't, and I've been out of town, so the Beautify Your Neighborhood grant reviews, I don't see where they're scheduled. Is there any word from that group yet?
You know, I don't have any information on if those are ready for review. I just have that on the list of.
Okay. Sometimes they're fairly early in the year, and I haven't heard anything yet this year, so.
Who's, that's Michelle's area, isn't it? Whose area is it?
Not on your list?
Planning, maybe?
There's nobody back there whose heads are.
Let us check.
Let's
fact,
taking responsibility.
That came up at our staff retreat today, and it didn't really get an update, so we'll get that to you.
It's not resonating, but we'll have an answer for the next meeting.
You bet.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. John?
Thank you. That's it.
Arts Council?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Board of Education, Greg?
The State of the Schools presentation is tomorrow night at the Rec Center, 6 to 8.
Very good. Morpsey?
Yes, Morpsey sponsored an event last Friday around the lunch hour, and Mike and I attended it, as well as many staff. And Ken Danter, who many of you are familiar with, gave a presentation about the future of Central Ohio and the demographics that are being projected. I'd say two main things that came out of it, I should have brought I think we already had given out some of the presentation, but one was that he said, and he was very emphatic about this actually, that in the past, they have been able to take 10 years at a time and keep looking back and project then forward based on things that have occurred earlier. And he says there's now a complete break in those projections, and that the future, you cannot predict the past, and you cannot predict the future based on the past and what people did. And then went on to say that because both the younger generation and the older generation are going more to the rental structure rather than purchasing, that they're much more interested in walkable neighborhoods than automobile exclusively, and all the things that we've been talking about for the last 3 years. And he did use Dublin as one of the examples of a community that has used this information to work on the Bridge Street area. So I think we are doing the right things and making our community have the continuum that is essential to the gaining of young people to come here or come home again, and ultimately moving. Because as he said, and we've heard from other speakers, that the hope is that if they get an apartment in your community, that when they are prepared then to purchase, that they have ingrained so much in the community and that your services have been so excellent that they will want to purchase in your community and stay there, and so that you have a lifelong person in your community. So I thought it was perhaps I thought it was a great presentation because it supported the direction that we're going, but you know, the statistics are what they are and the projections are what they are, and this is across the country. not just Central Ohio. He's able to extrapolate the national norms and then what the local expectation is as well.
Very good. It was a really good meeting. I think Dublin, we probably had as many or more representatives than anybody there. We had two to reiterate. The new Planning and Zoning Commissioners, Kathy DeRosa, Deborah Mitchell, Marilee, and myself. Terry Fogler was there, Dana McDaniel, Steve Langworthy, and we had a number of planning staffers that were in attendance as well. So, and Vicki Newell as well, exactly. So anyway, it was an excellent meeting. It was well worthwhile. And then US 33, Tim, I don't think there's been any activity, but
No, excuse me, as I think I stated at the last meeting, the next meeting of that group is Monday, February 23rd, I believe.
another meeting.
Another.
Very good. Council Roundtable, Mr. Peterson.
Just real quick, I wanted to thank Megan for, the city had put together these really great colored maps with respect to the water and sewer connections and that whole issue. And they're in color, and you gotta see them in color for them to be as effective as they really are. And she's putting a link on the website now for us people to be able to get on the website, click onto those color-coded maps and really understand the problem. So if you're interested in understanding it, go there. Thank you very much, Megan.
On that note, are we going to be having a meeting to discuss our policy with regard to water and sewer? I know we have talked about wanting to do that.
The answer is yes, but I think what we really need, do we need like a workshop format, Megan, for that? It's probably pretty extensive discussion, so when council is prepared and with all that you have going on to want to do that, we'll be happy to support you with that.
Okay. Right, that seems like another thing we should get on the calendar, maybe commit to it for April, May timeframe, I don't know. You know, once summer comes, we get very busy, but
Okay.
that is an important topic that we do need to circle back around in our spare time.
So, Greg, you've got all yours done, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Amy?
That's why I spoke up, because he
Okay.
was done. That's really all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Marilee?
I just want to raise up again the CODA issue. And I appreciate the citizens who don't even live in our community who came to speak to us this evening. I years ago was on the community citizen advisory. I don't know, even sure if they have it anymore, for CODA. And it was these kinds of issues that particular advisory committee actually addressed. And so perhaps now that was under a different leadership, perhaps now that they do not have such a thing anymore. But I know that these kind of transportation entities work at efficiencies. But I completely agree with what the citizens are saying. After all, it is the citizens who pass their levy. And it was the purpose of that passage was to ensure that, at the very least, they would retain what they have. And, of course, the expectation was, because that's how it was marketed, that there would be an expansion of those services. So to the area that they were talking about at this public meeting, that they were going, this Route 30 and all, it really, even if we would put a CODA place where we were talking about at Bright area, which we're not even sure we're going to do, but if we did, it has no relationship to the Linworth area and that Smoky Row and everything. So, you know, I hope that we send a strong letter to them, really, or have strong communication about our concern over not responding really to the citizens who are using the bus. And I just want to
Just specifically as that relates to Route 30?
Well, certainly that seems to be the one, I mean.
Well, yeah, there's a 58 and something else.
Whatever all these numbers are.
But 30 is the main one.
30 seems to be the one that everybody lifted up.
And council's okay with us sending a letter encouraging them to really reconsider keeping Route 30?
I am, yeah, I'm good with it.
Just want to make sure, okay, good, we'll do that.
I mean, I think the point is whatever we do here in Dublin, and our route, as I understand it, is 58, whatever we do here in Dublin, you know, was certainly not intended to diminish the service anywhere else.
Agreed. Yep.
Right, and that, I think, I totally agree, and I guess that I'm disappointed in myself for sure that we really did not engage and in being educated by them, which may be one of their ways of operating, I don't know, but if you put a place here, this is how it impacts the routes we'll select, you know, which we should have been apprised of, so we would at least know to take that into consideration. We were totally unaware of everything that they were going to eliminate until, in fact, I remember you thought they weren't eliminating them, and then we learned, of course, that they were going to eliminate these things. So, at any rate, I just wanted to bring that up again and thank the citizens for coming tonight to bring this to our attention.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I was going to follow up as well, sort of a different line, however. You know, in Dublin, we've long sought more opportunities for mass transit. That's always been part of our long-term plan. And the reality is that this existing park and ride site on Dale Drive is going to have to go away by necessity. So if we all agree, you know, that we need mass transit opportunities in Dublin, you know, wherever it's located, and I hope we have more than one in the future, it's necessarily going to consume land that would otherwise be revenue producing. I mean, one of the comments made this evening was that, you know, a park and ride didn't make sense, you know, when it could otherwise, you know, support office. You know, the fact of the matter is that wherever you would locate a park and ride or a mass transit facility, theoretically it would consume land that would otherwise be revenue producing in the form of office. So, you know, this city council and our predecessors and staff have been very good, you know, about, you know, our finances. That's why we enjoy the highest possible ratings from the two major rating agencies, and that's why we have reserves in the tens of millions of dollars. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tim. John? Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Merrily, I agree with you with respect to CODA. And also, you know, I think sooner or later we need to consider something over by the hospital. But that, to me, that begs a bigger question of CODA. Fine organization, a lot of us pay taxes, sales taxes to that organization, but it seems like the buses run in one direction, and that's to get workers from this area to Columbus, Ohio. There are not buses that are bringing people up to Dublin, Ohio to work. As we all know, we have 72,000 people working here every day, and I'm sure a lot of those live in other parts of central Ohio. So I think this whole discussion, I think, encompasses much more than a few routes here and there. I think we need to start talking in terms of a more global objective, if you will, particularly since we want to become more of a walkable community and less cars and that sort of thing. I think the bus service dovetails right into that. And also one more thing, Dana, welcome. I hope every week's not like the first week.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, everybody. I had occasion, actually, Dana and I went over to St. Bridget's, met with a senior group earlier last week, and they peppered us with some pretty good questions. We got through it. And then I also attended the Norris Center. They had a group in volunteers and people from the ACA on Medicare sign-up under the Health Care Act. Big group. It was a very large group there. And finally, I'd just like to note that this is a little early perhaps, but the St. Patrick's Day Parade that will be held on Saturday, March 14th, along with the the Grand Leprechaun Luncheon honoring Bob Adamak this year, as Dana pointed out, and the other festivities. So put that on your calendar and be ready, and we'll stand adjourned.